women are crushing it in all sorts of male-dominated businesses. Join Renee as she interviews some very interesting women about how they've defied the status quo and blazed a trail for the next generation.
Well, hello, and welcome to this episode of Defying the Status Quo. Gosh, we get to talk to so many interesting people in this podcast, and I am fascinated by the similarities between women in male-dominated industries. And today, we have the privilege of welcoming Therese Allison to the show. Therese was in the insurance brokerage industry and was able to retire early, was able to spend time with her family because she set some aggressive goals early on and really has enjoyed an amazing career. Therese, I can't wait to dive into your story. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Renee.
Okay, so I have to know right off the bat, how in the world did you get into insurance brokerage?
Oh, that is so funny. You know how some things happen. I happened into it because, believe it or not, I wasn't a PE major in college. So kind of the quick backstory on that was that I always played sports, right? That was where I got my competitive. I was beating the boys on the playgrounds. That was just kind of like where I felt comfortable in kind of around the boys, and then took that into business. But when I came out of after I had my undergrad, I was like, I don't think being a teacher for me, I think that would have been boring for me. And I just got into sales, and my second job out was they threw me on the streets and said, build a book of business, like go. So there I was, 26. I was blonde. I had glasses on. I wanted to look smart because I thought, okay, being a woman, I got to look smart. I can't be like, I need to make sure they take me seriously. So yeah, that's how I got into it. And it just went from there.
Okay, so personal question on that, because you and I have kids of similar ages. So I'm assuming that you had those suits with shoulder pads.
Yes.
Too, and you kind of dressed in kind of a boxy fashion. Aren't you so glad that's out of style now?
I'm so glad. In fact, Renee, if you look in the book, there's a picture of me and I have like a cream suit on, and definitely the boxy shoulders. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So tell us the title of your book, because I think it just leads into everything we're going to talk about today.
Okay. It's called Playing for Keeps: How a 21st Century Businesswoman Beat the Boys.
Okay. So if I read the book, what am I going to learn?
You are going to learn, in general, what I condensed all of my tips that I had of what worked for me into 16 pearls of wisdom. And taking a step back, with a 30-year-old son, he came out of UCLA when he was 22, 23, and he wanted me to write a story for him, my story. So I did. And I wrote lessons learned. And I gave him at the end a cheat sheet that I thought if he followed those things that I said, lessons learned, do's, don'ts, etc., that he would be successful. So I just kept mentoring him with the company that he went out. He went into insurance brokerage, but it wasn't due to me. I didn't actually get him his job. And at 27, he became the youngest principal in a multi-billion-dollar corporation in New York. At that point, I thought, okay, I got to write a book about this, and I need to help women because my son's 6'5", so there wasn't a far stretch, right, for the success. But I'm 5'4", as a woman, if I walked into a boardroom, I've got to figure out a way to get some attention versus my son who's 6'5". I told him, I go, you have presence when you walk in a room. You don't understand. So yeah, you'll learn, the 16 pearls of wisdom, and I give you examples of my personal experience. And then I have a kind of a super cool heritage that I take those bigger than life characters and show how they, worked with similar things. And then I have a section in each chapter where it's just funny stuff that happened to me that as women, we think, we can't really share with anyone. And I took the position that I'm going to be myself because that's what's going to sell. I mean, I can't be anyone else. I have to be authentic. And so this stuff would happen kind of all over the world with my traveling. And I call them Lucy moments. I'd share them with my clients, all the CEOs that were men, and they would just laugh. And they're like, you got to write a book. So there was the humor part of it, but I also used the smart part. They knew that I could do $1 million deals. They knew that I could make them look good, and they knew that I could help them invent things to look good. So it was kind of like a velvet glove of this funny, let's take the ego out of the room and then let's do the business. And it kind of is the great equalizer humor can be.
Absolutely. Use it all the time. It's the only way I get through some days, right?
Yeah, I always felt that if I walked into a room full of men, I would think to myself, I'm going to take my ego and I'm going to put it in a box. Like in the old days, they put cell phones in a box where you couldn't take them in a room or meeting. And so I'm going to put mine in the box and I'm going to walk in and I am going to use humor. And these guys won't realize it, but they're going to be putting their egos in the same box. And all of us are going to sit down and do business on the same level after that because the ice has been broken.
Therese, I feel like we could end the podcast now and everyone would have gotten the best nugget of the year.
That's the nugget.
Just from that piece of advice. So
yeah,
before we go any further, Amazon, is there another place that we can find your book? How do people?
You can go on Amazon, and I also have a website which has a lot of really cool things on it. It's theresaallison.com, and it's Theresa with an E at the end, Allison.com. So yeah, I mean, I have to tell you, if you're a woman and you get this book, I've had more. I love it. More women that are like in a lawyer, and she says, "Oh my gosh, I was going to interview for 2 DA's offices, and one in San Diego, one in Orange." And she says, "All I could think of when I got down to the last interview was your tips for success. People do business with people they like." And she kept saying that over and over. She got both jobs.
That is amazing. Okay, so that's my reading for this weekend. I'm going to tell you that for sure. I cannot wait to get my hands on it. But one of the things that is really intriguing to me about you is how you managed your finances. And I think that could be really valuable for our listeners today because this is an area where even more than confidence, women lack financial literacy. So how did you educate yourself about finances?
That's really, really good question. Being a PE major, I didn't quite get it there. But so I grew up, to give you a little bit of background, my dad was a carpet salesman, so we had very humble means. So I really didn't learn it there, but I did learn from my heritage that every other generation, somehow they would lose their wealth. And then the next generation would have to rebuild it. So there's a long line of pioneer entrepreneurs that came over in the gold rush. So kind of the history lesson was that. So I always held that in my mind, that whatever I build, I'm going to hold on to. And the other thing that I always held was if I ever built something, I would never dip into principal. I would never, like if I'm going to live off something or it's going to give me a certain, I will never take down the principal. And I've been retired now for 20 years, so I was just really conservative. I never lived above my means. Like if I put any money, if I charge anything, it's paid off each month. And I've given those same, tips to my kids. I'm like, never do this, principal, charge. So something happened with 9/11. Maybe we can talk about that later, but it was kind of it was a brush with it for me. And it made me rethink everything. And my contract with the company that purchased my company, Aon, it was going to complete in 2004. So I had 3 years where I realized I really want to, what am I doing here? I'm traveling all over. Yes, I'm making a lot of money. I was giving up millions by getting out. Okay. But I just felt at that point it was more important for my children who were 8 and 11 to get out. So for those 3 years, no one knew this. I took a third of my salary, and because I was an executive, I had access to a deferred compensation plan. So I took every tool that my employer gave to either employees and or executives, and I socked as much money as I could. I put it away. I maxed everything. And it was funny because the guy that was in charge of the West Coast, he said, Theresa, because he was trying to prep me for like taking my income down at the end of the contract. He's like, well, you're one of the highest paid people on the West Coast. And I just nodded my head and I'm thinking, you have no idea. I'm not spending that money. I have a plan. I'm getting out to take care of my kids. And so that's what I did. I just was, money was not as a huge or big a deal to me. It was a reward for winning and for competing against the boys, because guess what? Money is respect for men. So as women, it is. At the end of the day, that's how they measure their success with each other. And so I was like, I'm right there with them. I'm doing deals, I'll get paid. And that was great. But what I did with that was just smart with it. I didn't live lavishly. People, when I retired and became a room mom for 6 years, they're like, we had no idea that you did what you did until I wrote the book. A couple of years ago, I'm like, yeah, I just, it was what it was.
Well, I love that. So what I heard you say was that you were purposeful about it. You were thinking ahead 3 years. You were setting a vision for what financial freedom would look like for you. And then you lived under your means, probably saying no to certain things that your kids wanted or that you thought that you wanted during that time so that you could provide a secure future for yourself and for others.
Yes. For me, Renee, what was so important was it wasn't all the money. It was the footprint that I would leave for my kids. And the money was a means to that.
Yeah, I think that's a really wise approach to money, is to think about how it's going to work for you or for your kids in the future, what that legacy looks like, not what that paycheck looks like.
Exactly. Because legacy really is everything in the end. It just really is. I mean, you can make a ton of money and you can be miserable, right? I mean, so if you're going to make a ton of money and it's semi-miserable, put it away so you can, do what you want to do later.
Yeah. So what does that look like for you? What does that look like today? What's a day in the life of Therese Allison today?
Oh, to most people, it wouldn't be that exciting. But after I got, my last is she's going to be a junior. And so she'll be going to college in a couple of years. And you know what? I wrote the book to help women. So what it looks like is various things here and there, podcasts, articles, media, just to get the message out there that, I have a book that can help you. And so that, I'm kind of used to Renee being a workhorse, whether it was in business or with my kids, or now it's like, what's next, right? It's like, okay.
Right. We have a new chapter coming up. So do you do any coaching or do you have?
Yeah, I'm going to work my way into that. I have the website. You'll notice there's some mentoring on there. And it's funny because people have all said to me, will you do a coaching package? And I will definitely do that. I kind of feel right now the coaching is the book. And then the next step will be some kind of a mentoring package. Because really, as a woman and an executive in business, we all go through the same things. So it really doesn't matter as much the industry. I mean, it might be more severe in some versus other as far as what happens in a male-dominated industry. But we all feel kind of somewhat alone, and we're in silos. So,
absolutely.
Just to try and connect.
I've noticed through doing all of these podcast interviews that women are so similar, and the things that make me strong in my industry are the exact same things that made you strong in your industry. The flavor of the trial was maybe a little bit different, but I have yet to meet a woman who's a badass in her industry who has not had to climb a mountain with her fingernails being ripped out.
Yeah. And you got to watch your back. You got to watch everything, your side, your back. I mean, when I got out in 2004, I felt like, oh my gosh, I went to sleep for like 16 years and I woke up and they're still asking women to take notes. I was appalled. I have to be honest. I was appalled because for me, I managed that by, okay, we're doing rock, paper, scissors. It's going to be a 50-50 thing as far as who needs to take the notes or who will. It's not going to be assuming that I'm a woman and I'm going to be doing, whatever it is that most of the men historically have not done. So.
Yeah. So how do we as women begin to change that narrative in our workplaces?
First of all, I think one of the keys with being a woman in business is to be authentic and use a velvet glove. So historically, most of the time, business will look at a woman executive and will say, she's probably really tough. I expect her to be abrasive. That's the only way she's going to survive. And my particular approach was, I don't need to be tough or abrasive. I just need, I'll use my femininity with the laughing and the jokes. I'll be real firm, though, when it comes to business. You're going to know that I know what I'm doing. And I think that as a woman, when we have opposing traits like that, it allows us to navigate any given situation in a man's world to be successful.
That is so good. So what I'm hearing you say is that you need to be authentic. You need to be soft and feminine when that's appropriate, and you need to be firm and consistent when that's appropriate. And using your entire authentic toolbox is how you get ahead. Do you feel like that reflects what you were saying? I just wanted to throw some different words on it.
Absolutely reflects it. And guess what, Renee? This is my feeling. I don't think men can really compete with that. At the end of the day, they don't have a toolbox. While they might have an advantage because of the good old boy, whatever, in the long run, if as women, if we lose our toolbox and we balance those traits, that's how we as women can make a difference. Because they're not going to say, okay, I don't want to use the word, that they just think that they think have to be men to be successful in business. No, we're women in business. This is how we roll, right? We're soft but strong. We're feminine but firm. It's okay to be us.
Yeah, I find that being a woman in business is really a whole lot of fun. And when I first started out in business, I enjoyed being around men because there was a lot less drama being around men. But as I've grown more secure and as I've met other women who are also secure, I find that I really enjoy interacting with other women. And so that's what I'm focused on now. I love helping other women realize the potential that they have. And it sounds like you and I are identically minded on that.
Yep. Other, executive women for sure that are secure, I get along with great because we're not going to have an ego, right? But I don't know about you, probably in your industry, you had less. I had female executives in the healthcare industry that I had more of a problem with the women in my business, with my niche that we sold to, than the men. And I had to use the velvet glove to try and manage them.
I've experienced quite a bit of that. It's a really tough industry in aviation in general, but especially in aircraft sales. And there have definitely been instances where I've been pushed around a little bit, bullied a little bit. I mean, attorneys do that. That's their MO. And I work with a lot of attorneys. So it comes naturally with the job. But the ones that sting are when it comes from a woman who says she's on your side and then stabs you in the back. And I've had to remove myself from relationships and groups because I decided I wasn't okay with bullying. And absolutely, it's the women. And so as a woman, I try to be uber conscious of not making decisions that could come across as bullying or as degrading to another woman. I try to be, and of course, I'm sure I fail in certain instances, but I try to be really conscious about.
But you think about it though. There are a lot of women that don't. I mean, that's part of being kind. I got to tell you, there's kindness personally and professionally. That's a major thing for me. And kindness with other women, and understanding that it's tough for them, that stuff, it's a good thing for them and it's a good thing for you. But oh my gosh, this one time it was a new COO that came in, and I had been working with the CEO prior to that. I had established myself with this particular niche for several years. When I was in the meeting, it's almost like she took a hammer to me. She was just so rude, so mean. So I was so inappropriate. I went back to my office and I thought, how am I going to deal with this? Am I going to sit and be bullied and let her do this? Because that's what's going to happen. She set the tone. I wrote a letter to the CEO and I said, you know what? I like you guys, but I basically, in so many words, said I won't work for you anymore. He panicked because it's all a good old boy industry. And for him to have hired a COO that was not being appropriate with me in terms of being a bully, he's like, I'll take her off. You don't have to work with her. You can work with me, whatnot. So I think as a woman, when you know your worth and you're secure, it's okay to put that out there. And I just felt like, okay, I'll lose the client, but I'm not going to take that kind of emotional, kind of bullying.
I think that's so valuable. And I really hope that someone who's listening to this heard that and pulls courage from what you did and makes the same line in the sand for herself or himself. Bullying in the workplace is not productive for anyone. And it's okay for us to stand up for ourselves. And that I think we've seen so much of that over the last few years, but it goes over and over again. Each one of us, when we stand up for ourselves, are standing up for the hundreds of people who are following in our footsteps also, right? When we have the courage to stand up to a bully, we make that workplace better for everybody.
Yep, I totally agree with you. It's like, as women, we blaze trails to a certain extent relative to putting our boundaries down and showing that it's not okay. And like you said, I think courage is a really good word for that. And so, I mean, I think probably you feel this way in terms of what you're doing. Same with me. It's like, if there's anything that I can share that I have done to help someone do that, that's why I'm here, you know?
I think that's fantastic. Well, I love that we've had this time together, and I know we've touched on a whole bunch of different topics. Is there anything that you feel like is important to defying the status quo that we haven't talked about yet?
You know, I would just say this. One of my pearls of wisdom is I always say I can. I never say I can't. So as a woman, just when you want a goal, just say, I'm going to do this. Put your mind to it. Get I can't out of your vocabulary. Have a vision, focus on it, and you can do it. You can do it.
I love that. Overcoming limiting beliefs is so important. So here's what I do about that. I give someone else, a couple of other people in my life, permission to call me out when I have a limiting belief where I'm saying, I can't do that, or why would I do that? And so I wonder if you have any people that you give permission, or you have any other tip for how you might identify blind spots that you have in this area.
I don't really have other people, but I do police myself. And what I do? I get myself out of negativity, because sometimes when you have those limiting beliefs, it's because you're stuck in negativity. If you can get rid of that, you can get back to getting past those barriers and making stuff happen. And toward the end of the book, I do talk about, make it happen. And I talk about ways to do that and just examples of people in, history that have done that. Read stuff. Talk to people that are role models, do all of that, because it will actually inspire you to go the extra, it'll get you over that line of limits.
That motivation, just kind of knowing why you're doing something, also really helps too. Like having that self-talk about, I can do this, and it's important because probably that double whammy really will help people who seem to be stuck in that negative mindset.
Yeah.
I mean, your why, I think, is on a photo behind you on your desk, right? And it's 3 kiddos and a lot of people who have read your book, right? Your why is a big why. You want to leave a legacy. You've talked about that. And so getting back in touch with your why can help you overcome some of that self-talk as well.
Yeah, I think it takes you into the bigger picture, which is important.
That's perfect. So you mentioned your website and your book earlier. Will you wrap with that, just how people can get in touch with you and what they should expect to be seeing from you or hearing from you in the future?
Okay, so the book is Playing for Keeps, How a 21st Century Businesswoman Beat the Boys. And my website is theresaallison.com. That's Teresa with an E. So you can reach the book on either one. I have a lot of interesting things on blogs on my website as well. And, I already have in my mindset what I'm going to do for a second book. So, that I'm sure probably within the next 18 months, I will do something with that, but mentoring packages as well. So you can follow me on Instagram. It's all there on my website. So
I love it. Therese, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. If you enjoyed this podcast recording, would you please share it with someone else? Send it to them in a text or tag them in it on a social post. Would love to have you share it, review the podcast overall, and please connect with me at Renee Bangelsdorf on any of the social media platforms. Therese, thanks again for being here today.
thank you so much for having me.